Roughly 5,600 years ago, a catastrophe unfolded in what is now Washington state that is almost impossible to picture. A colossal chunk of a mountain, its entire weakened upper flank, broke loose and came roaring down into the lowlands as a river of mud, rock, and ice the size of a moving landscape. It traveled tens of miles from the summit, all the way down into the flat valleys of the Puget Sound region, into the very ground where the modern towns of Kent and Auburn sit today. Thousands of people now live, work, and send their kids to school on top of that ancient, hardened mud flow, most of them with no idea it is even there. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you cold. That catastrophe may not have required a volcanic eruption at all. The mountain simply gave way, and the setup that produced it, the same weakened rock, the same colossal load of ice, the same steep, unstable slopes, still exists today on the very same mountain. Its name is Mount Rainier. And it is the reason this peak, which has not violently erupted in around 1,000 years, is still ranked as the single most dangerous volcano in the United States. So today, we are going to look at Mount Rainier from the angle that actually keeps scientists and emergency planners up at night. And it is not the one you would expect, because when most people worry about a volcano, they picture lava and ash and a towering eruption. But the true nightmare scenario for Rainier is something quieter, faster, and in some ways far more terrifying. A disaster that could strike the valleys below with little warning, and that does not necessarily need an eruption to happen at all. We are going to break down exactly what that threat is, why this specific mountain is so uniquely primed for it, the remarkable warning system that has been built to fight it, and what all of this means for the tens of thousands of people living directly in its path. No hype, no doomsday nonsense, just the real, sobering, and genuinely fascinating science of a sleeping giant. And by the end, you will understand this mountain in a way that most people who live right next to it never do. Before we get into it, do me one quick favor. Drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever lived somewhere with a natural hazard hanging over it? A volcano, a fault, a flood zone? How much did you actually think about it day to day? I read every single comment. And if you want to understand the real threats out there and be the first to know when something changes, subscribe right now. It is completely free. Hit that like button too. Let us push for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm gets it to the people who need to understand this. All right, let us get into it. Now, Rainier has been in the news, and that is worth addressing head on, because it is what reminds everyone this mountain is alive. Recently, the volcano produced the largest earthquake swarm ever recorded in its monitored history, a cluster of well over 1,000 small earthquakes rippling beneath the summit. That sounds alarming, and it made headlines everywhere. But I want to be completely straight with you, because the truth matters more than the fear. Throughout that entire record-breaking swarm, the U.S. Geological Survey kept Mount Rainier's alert level at green, normal, the lowest setting there is. Scientists flew a specialized aircraft directly over the summit to sample the volcano's gases, and they found no sign of the sulfur dioxide that would indicate rising magma. Their conclusion was clear. The swarm was caused by hot water moving through the volcano's underground plumbing, not by magma pushing toward the surface. Rainier was not waking up, so that is the reassurance up front. And it is real. But here is why that swarm still matters, and why it is the perfect doorway into today's story. Because it was a reminder that this mountain is not dead. It is an active, living volcano with a hot, wet, restless interior. And that hot, wet interior is precisely what makes Rainier so dangerous, just not in the way most people assume. So let me introduce you to the real threat, the one with a name most people have never heard: a lahar. A lahar is a volcanic mudflow, and it is one of the most destructive forces in all of nature. Picture a slurry with the consistency of wet concrete, a churning mixture of water, mud, rock, boulders, and shattered ice, thundering down a mountain's river valleys at highway speeds. It is not like a flood of water that you might wade through. It is a fast-moving wall of debris that can be tens of feet deep, dense enough to carry boulders the size of cars and to snap full-grown trees like twigs. It buries everything in its path, and then as it slows and settles, it hardens into a solid, concrete-like mass that entombs whatever it covered. Lahars can travel enormous distances, many tens of miles, from the volcano, far out into the lowlands, long after the mountain itself has disappeared behind the horizon. And Mount Rainier is, without exaggeration, one of the most perfectly engineered lahar machines on the planet. Let me explain why. Two things make Rainier uniquely primed for this. The first is ice. Mount Rainier carries more glacial ice and snow on its slopes than any other mountain in the contiguous United States. More than all the other Cascade volcanoes combined. That is an almost unimaginable reservoir of frozen water sitting on the mountain, just waiting for something to mobilize it. The second factor is the one most people never hear about, and it is genuinely chilling. Mount Rainier is, quite literally, rotting from the inside. Remember that hot water moving through the volcano? The same hydrothermal system that caused the earthquake swarm? That water is acidic, and over thousands of years it has been chemically attacking the rock inside the mountain, slowly transforming hard, solid volcanic stone into soft, weak, crumbly clay. So beneath that beautiful, snow-capped exterior, portions of the mountain are being quietly weakened, degraded, turned into something with the structural integrity of wet chalk. And that is the recipe for disaster. Enormous slopes of ice-covered, chemically weakened rock, stacked steeply over 3 miles high. It does not take much imagination to see how that could fail. And this is the terrifying nuance, the thing that makes Rainier so different from a volcano you can simply watch for eruption warning signs. A lahar at Rainier does not necessarily require an eruption to happen. Yes, an eruption could trigger one, by melting the ice suddenly. But a large section of that weakened, water-saturated, rotting rock could also collapse on its own, perhaps triggered by a strong earthquake, perhaps simply by the relentless pull of gravity on rock that has finally been weakened past its breaking point. That is what scientists believe may have happened in the great collapse of the past, the one that buried the future sites of those valley towns. No eruption necessarily needed. Just the mountain one day letting go. And because it might not come with the weeks of warning that a building eruption usually provides, the swelling ground, the escalating quakes, the rising gases, a collapse-driven lahar could give the people downstream very little time to react. That is the scenario that defines Rainier's danger. Not a distant, dramatic eruption you can see coming for weeks, but a sudden avalanche of mud that could be racing down a populated valley before most people even understand what has happened. So who is actually in the path? This is where it gets real. Below Rainier, the river valleys that would channel a lahar, the Puyallup, the Carbon, the Nisqually, the White River, run directly through populated communities and out toward the densely populated lowlands around Tacoma and the southern Puget Sound. Tens of thousands of people, by many estimates on the order of 80,000 or more, live and work on top of the hardened remains of Rainier's past lahars, right in the zones a future one would follow. Entire towns sit in these valleys. And this is not a theoretical, someday concern for these communities. It is a fact of daily life that they have remarkably learned to live with. Which brings us to the genuinely inspiring part of this story, the fight back. Because the people in these valleys are not helpless, and what has been built to protect them is one of the great quiet triumphs of modern science. Mount Rainier is ringed by a lahar detection system, a network of sensors positioned in the river valleys designed to detect the specific ground vibrations of a lahar the instant one begins to move down the mountain. The moment those sensors pick up the signature of an approaching wall of mud, they can trigger warning sirens throughout the valley communities, giving people the one thing that matters most in this scenario: minutes. Precious minutes to get out of the valley and up to high ground. And the communities have organized their entire response around those minutes. In the town of Ording, which sits in one of the most exposed valleys, the school children do not just practice fire drills, they practice lahar evacuation drills, walking on their own 2 feet, out of the school and up to designated high ground, because in a real lahar, roads may be jammed or cut off, and the only reliable escape is to move uphill on foot, fast. They have built pedestrian evacuation routes for exactly this purpose. Children in these towns grow up knowing the sound of the sirens and knowing exactly where to run. Think about that. An entire community that has looked the danger squarely in the face and organized its schools, its infrastructure, and its culture around surviving it. That is not fear. That is preparation. And it is genuinely heroic. Now, I want to give you the honest, calming reality check because it matters, and it is true. As I record this, Mount Rainier is quiet. It sits at a green, normal alert level. There is no collapse underway, no eruption looming, no imminent lahar. The mountain is being watched around the clock by some of the best volcanologists and instruments in the world, and the recent swarm, as we covered, was hot water, not rising magma. The threat we have been discussing is a real, permanent feature of living near this mountain, but permanent and real is not the same as happening tomorrow. The danger is measured in the long timescales of geology, and the whole point of the monitoring and the warning system is to make sure that whenever the mountain does stir towards something serious, the people below get every possible second of warning. So this is not a video telling you to panic. It is a video telling you to understand, because understanding is exactly what turns a helpless population into a prepared one. And that leads to what you can actually take from this, wherever you live. If you are anywhere in Rainier's lahar hazard zones, the most important things you can do are simple, and they cost almost nothing. Know your evacuation route, to high ground, and know a backup route. Learn the sound of the warning sirens and take them absolutely seriously if they ever sound. Do not wait. Do not investigate. Just move uphill immediately, because in a lahar, the people who survive are the ones who react instantly, rather than pausing to figure out what is happening. Sign up for official alerts from your county emergency management and from the USGS so that any real change in the mountain's status reaches you straight from the scientists and not from a rumor online. If you have kids in the local schools, know their evacuation plan and practice the walk to high ground yourself so that if the day ever comes, your feet already know the way. These are small, one-time preparations that turn a nightmare scenario into something survivable. Let me leave you with a bigger thought because I think Mount Rainier teaches something profound about how to live with danger. Here is a mountain of staggering beauty, a postcard-perfect peak that millions of people love and look at every day. And it is, at the same time, a mountain that is slowly rotting from within, loaded with more ice than any peak in the country, capable of sending a wall of mud into the lowlands with little warning, possibly without even erupting. Both of those things are true at once, and the response of the people who live beneath it is not to flee and not to pretend the danger is not there. It is to look at it honestly, to build the sirens and the sensors and the evacuation routes, to teach their children where to run, and then to go on living full, ordinary, beautiful lives in the shadow of the giant. That is the whole lesson. We cannot stop Mount Rainier. We cannot know the exact day it will finally let go. But we can watch it. We can warn each other, and we can be ready. And in doing so, we take a threat that sounds like the end of the world and turn it into something a community can actually survive. That choice between panic and preparation is the one thing entirely in our hands. We are going to keep tracking Mount Rainier and every volcano in the Cascades, so subscribe so you never miss an update. And drop that comment I asked for at the start. Where are you? Watching from, and have you ever lived with a hazard hanging over you? Because behind every siren and every evacuation route are real families living beneath a living mountain, and understanding it is how we all stay ready. Let us hit 5,000 likes on this one. Stay safe, stay prepared, look out for the people around you, and I will see you in the next one.